Okay. Well, hello and welcome back, everybody, to the For the Doers podcast. I am Sayda, and I am here with my favorite guest, Janis Sadoyama.
Aw.
Hello, Miss Janis.
Hello.
So this is the 10th episode, FYI. I can't believe that this is a 10th episode. This is so wonderful. The conversations that we're just starting to have as we grow and evolve and develop are getting more and more fantastic and interesting and intricate. And today I wanted to talk to Janis. This is still the beginning of 2022, and we've been having some great conversations about how we're starting the year and how we're looking ahead. And that's why I want to speak to Janis today. Can you tell everybody what it is that you do so they understand why I think you're so fantastic and have helped me so much? But tell us what you do at Innovative Domain.
Ooh,
In a
pressure.
nutshell. I'm putting pressure on you, girl.
Pressure.
You know I will. And then I'll laugh too.
I know.
but in a nutshell, like you're so good at, you've been so good at helping me with my elevator pitches.
Aww.
But, what is it that you do?
Well, thank you. I mean, that means,
Of course.
honestly, that means a lot to me. I guess like the simplest way to put it is I help people build their brand. And even though that sounds very like vague and broad stroked, it's probably like in layman's terms, like the simplest thing, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna help you build this thing, and an emphasis on personal branding. So if you are your business, it kind of help tell that story of what it is that matters to you and what it is that you want to share with the world.
Yes.
And I think it comes out, the best goodness that comes out is through like conversation. Like with you, it's like, okay, like talk to me about what it is that interests you and what lights you up, and paint that picture for me of who Sayda is if I've met you for the first time. And then from there, it's pulling out things and kind of reading it back to you and like, how does this resonate with you? Is this something that interests you? Should we dive deeper and kind of discover these sections of Sayda, or of the person who's wanting to build their brand? Like, let's get curious, because the intent really is authentically communicating what it is that you do, or what it is that you want to do. And I think emphasis on authenticity, because people have pretty dynamic BS meters, and they can call it. They can be like, yeah. So it's never something that, of course there's brands and all that goodness that's fabricated out there, but it's more of how can we make this the most authentic reflection of you as possible, because that's really how you find your clients. That's how you find your people. And I hate using that word tribe, but it's like, that's how you find the people that you want to be surrounded by, is by really putting out who you are. So people are like, oh my gosh, that resonates with me. Let's talk about this, or let's, this person is the right person to coach me or guide me because they get me.
I love
I don't even think I answered your question.
I think you did. And I like it. I mean, I think it's better than a yes or no quick answer, because it's something that I think is so relevant now. I feel,
well, everybody has a personal brand, whether they like it or not, right? Like, have you ever Googled yourself?
I don't like to Google myself.
I know.
I do not like it. I'm scared of what's going to come up.
Uh-oh. But it's one of those things where if like, let's say like somebody wants to start a coaching practice or they're a
Yes.
realtor, things like that, where they search and see what's out there. If you don't kind of take the reins and write that narrative, the world will make that narrative for you.
Well, I think that that's why what you do is so important and incredibly relevant right now, because we're getting to the point where we all need to do that. I don't think, you know what I mean? Me coming from being a leader, management in fashion and luxury, I don't feel like I have a choice anymore on writing my own narrative or not, especially when you start leveling up or want to level up, because there is so much noise. There's so many people. One of the things that I tell people that come to me for advice is, you have to make it easy on the people who you want to speak to. They're not going to make up who you are for you. They're looking at dozens, sometimes hundreds of people, applicants for different positions, but if they know exactly who you are and how you fit in, you're making it so much easier for them and for yourself, because you should know. And this is what I've gotten from our conversations. Not that I didn't know, but I just became clearer on who I am and the value that I bring. If I'm productizing myself, like, what you said earlier, if I'm a product, I have to know what value I bring to whatever business I want to be in. And I have to know what environment I will thrive in. And that comes from a lot of falling on your face, making mistakes, and saying, oh, wait. And I'm the type of person that has had, I've been in luxury retail for 15 years, but I had a lot of other jobs, especially in my 20s when I was trying to find myself. It went from, wow, I've done a lot of things. But you helped me to narrow it down to who I am right now with all of those things that I've done in the past, because it's hard for us to sometimes be objective when it comes to ourselves and what we bring to the table. So I think it's incredibly relevant right now when people have had so much time to think about themselves and think about how they want to show up, not just for other people, but for themselves. So yes, you did answer my question.
Okay, good. I love that. I love that you say like how people want to show up for other people, but I think there's so much. It's like putting the oxygen mask on first. It's like how do you show up for other people if you can't show up for yourself? So you're going to sit there and like, have a really good idea of who you are and the boundaries you set and what you need to do to prove yourself, and then it expands out to other people, right?
So yeah, let's take that segue. Because
there's that B word.
There's that B word, boundaries. And one of the things that you said to me last week that made me just stop and click, because what I love about you is that you can express things. I have a little bit of an issue expressing myself because I feel emotions, but I don't always have the best way of putting it into words. And you put something into words for me that, in the process that I'm going through in my life right now, I'm intuitively doing what you actively said that you were doing, about, setting boundaries for yourself. So, well, let you say what you were saying, like what you're doing in the beginning of the year, how you're looking forward, and how you're setting boundaries.
Oh, I love that. Side note, we always have like the best conversations after we stop hitting record. And then we always
Yeah.
like, okay, next week we're going to talk about this. Next week we'll talk about this. Don't forget this.
Totally.
Yeah, because I think it comes off the heels of our conversation about New Year's resolutions and how we want to do things. And, you know, we both said we kind of, like we know what we need to do. It's New Year's resolutions, while they're a reminder and a fresh start, it's kind of gimmicky. It feels a little gimmicky sometimes. Because right, it's the New Year's when you're going to start to do stuff. You should be doing it on a consistent basis. But holiday time, especially like Christmas, like I feel like it starts with Thanksgiving, goes Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, where I feel, or I felt, I should say felt, because we moved on, obligated to text people who, they're like, we're acquaintances. I wouldn't say that we're friends anymore, but it was just the quote unquote nice thing to do, or I don't even want to say the right thing to do, because who's to say what's like, is it right to send a text that you're not really genuinely feeling? It's just sort of like, right? Like it's not the right thing to do. It's more of something. It was like, I'll be real. It was probably more of, it's a pat on the back that I did that. Like, oh, cool. Okay. Like I'm going to be the big person and I'm going to text all these people and say like, happy holidays, you know, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And I'll be honest, I did it for Thanksgiving. I did it for Christmas. And I was like, what if for New Year's, I just receive it? Like, obviously I'm going to reach out to the people closest to me and, you know, things that matter. I'm going to text and reach out to them. But the people who I'm like, if I have to think extra hard to add these individuals to my list, what if I kind of let that trickle away? And then I really double down on the people who matter to me. So instead of sending these 50 text messages to people who are like, oh yeah, and we're acquaintances. And obviously I would be pleasant seeing them, and there's no hard feelings or anything. Right. But why not send a message, a longer message, or a call or an email or a letter to somebody who matters to me, who I know in my heart of hearts, like that's the person these are the people I want to invest in, because I feel good around them. We have good energy. We have good conversation, things like that. So I'm like, well, let's double down on the people that matter versus checking the box that, okay, I did the thing. I texted. I was the quote unquote nice person because I said Happy New Year.
I
like,
love
it doesn't
that.
mean anything.
Well, I love the doubling down on the people. And the key thing for me that you said was, we feel good around each other. They make me feel good. I mean, that's my theme. You know, I'm ahead of you in years. That doesn't always mean in experience, but you know, we're all going through different experiences.
Listen, my soul feels 120. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm an old lady.
But you know, we're going through different things, and I love what you're saying, because I feel like I've been in a similar position, but again, doing it more intuitively. Because over the last couple of years, you know, I had my dad being a caretaker to him and going just through a lot. I mean, we've all been through a lot of things in the last couple of years, but setting the boundaries, like I'm ruthless now with setting boundaries, like ruthless, because of what I have been through. And one of the important things to me is being around the people who are for me and I am for them. And it's a symbiotic thing. And, you know, the whole frenemy thing for me, absolutely not. I don't have time for that. And if I have a so-called friend, and I'm saying that in quotes, you know, that doesn't make me feel good or tries to diminish me in whatever passive aggressive way or whatever, I don't have time for that. I'm very okay with letting people go because I've lost my mom, I've lost my dad, I lost a sister years ago. Like, what are you going to do to me? Why should I put up with someone who is, not 100% for me? Why should I put up with
100%.
that? Or that, tries to make me feel insecure or whatever. And we all have these relationships that we have for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's nothing
Those are the
wrong
tricky
with,
ones, right? Like the
girl,
ones, the years, the one where
the
it's like, oh,
years.
we've been friends for 20 years, 25 years. And it's like,
But you're not that same person anymore. And that's where
yeah.
boundaries do come in for yourself. Like, how do you want to feel? And we're not all going to feel great all the time, but when times are tough, that's when you know who your friends are because of the behavior. How is that person? And it doesn't mean that people have to be, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a situation, but when I'm going through stuff, which I have been, I know exactly who my friends are, the people who, even if they just say, hey, how's it going? Or, hey, I was thinking about you, and vice versa. And I don't know, I think for me, the best ones are time passes and it's like no time has passed with that person. And there's no like, well, why didn't you call me yesterday? Because I'm here to tell you I am not that girl. I am not waiting to exhale. I have a lot going on. I'm the best friend if you want to cancel plans with, because I'll be like, it's all right, boo. I got stuff to do at home. But when you feel when your friends are your ride or die people, because you both support each other when times are tough.
And I think too, there's no explanation needed.
Oh, this is why we gel.
Right? There's not
no
like this drawn
explanation.
out thing of why this or why that, but it's more of like, all right, cool. We're here now. Like what? Like, let's continue. It's not
Yes.
harboring like petty stuff.
No. Even though we can all be petty.
Oh. Like I'm certified in that somewhere. I got that certification somewhere. Hang it on my wall.
Right. It's like, I don't
Got
go
my
there.
doctorate at Petty
there.
University.
But petty in a fun way, right?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
I'm like, oh, maybe that is a resolution I should have made.
Don't you dare. But we've had that conversation too. It's like, who are your people?
Yeah. And I think too, it's okay to say, like, there comes a point where who you are as a person. Like, I think I remember like talking to one of my girlfriends, like it used to be like, I run with like a lot of girlfriends. Like we've known each other since like junior high school. And, and it's like, well, what if, and to your point about growing up and you're different people when you were younger to who you are now, it's like, well, at what point is who I am now doesn't no longer gels with who this person
right.
is. So it becomes that like weird conflict of like, could like, let's just let it go, like float away by itself versus like having to do like a hard, like a friend breakup. And you're like, nope.
It's so, yeah, that's very interesting that you say that, because don't you feel when that happens, like you're like, okay, I have to have a conversation. Like, do you feel obligated to have that conversation with people when it's like, you know what, this isn't working anymore?
I mean,
I don't. Like, I won't. I'm just like,
I
bye.
don't think so either. I'm like very diplomatic by nature. Like I'm a Capricorn. I'm very diplomatic. Like I'm like very
Yeah, that's
structured
true. It's your
in
time.
like the relationship sense. Like I always feel like the peacemaker. No,
Interesting.
I kind of just like it to go away by itself. Like
Yes,
it's like,
yes,
okay.
yes.
And I'll be honest, like I moved away. Oh my gosh. We're going on 8 years now. And I think it's very different to be
Oh, wow.
in a city where it's like you grew up in, your friends are there, they for the most part are still kind of there. Like
Mhm.
it's pretty amazing what happens when you move away and like how certain relationships like sift away because it's more
On their
effort,
own.
it's more effort to like to check in and like, and it's not obligation. It's like, no, because I want to talk to I want to talk to these people. Like it's more now it's built on more on a want, and it's,
Yes,
who your people are because they reach out, or, it's not just a one-way street.
right.
So I think that's kind of a nice thing because it's like, oh, it's the distance that kind of driven us. When in reality, it's like, well, it's also who we are as people. It's kind of, we've drifted apart too in that regard.
It's weird because I don't know where it comes from for me, but I do always initially feel, like, well, if your character is strong, then you should have a conversation. I mean, it depends on the situation also with people. And do they deserve that conversation in your mind? And that's also setting boundaries. Like if I feel somebody treats me badly, I'm not having a conversation with them. That's how I feel. But there's always this, I don't know if it's a Virgo nagging thing, like, you should tell them. You should tell them how you feel.
Something tells me a Virgo nagging sounds very different than that, though. Like, you better get out there and tell them. They're like louder.
It is louder, but
You're like, shh.
I
Hear
think I've beaten that voice down over the years, that particular voice. But I think the older we get, I don't know, and maybe I shouldn't say that it's the older we get, but I think it's so important to set boundaries because it is a form of self-care.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it, and why I sometimes say, why should I put myself through going through all that stuff again?
Yeah.
Unless it really bothers me so much and it feels unresolved.
Yeah. I think so too. I think too, there's like a threshold. So you don't get to I'm over it overnight. It's like a series of incidents or
Right.
behaviors or things like that that don't really sit with you, at least for me. But
Interesting.
if in my thoughts, and I've had this conversation with girlfriends in the past too, where it's like, if the relationship means that much to you, you're going to come to them and be like, hey, can we talk about this? It's like,
Yeah.
I'm not cool with this. Like, for example, like it's very easy to like harbor resentment and just kind of hold grudges and things like that and be like, oh, that's who that person is.
Mm-hmm.
Without having a conversation. It's almost like unfair to the other person, in my opinion.
See, that's where I'm getting to.
Because I had a girlfriend who, and she's one of my closest friends. Years ago, when I first started like working for myself, she would like, we'd go out to lunch, I'd meet her for lunch or something, and they're like, oh, we have to get back, and she's like, oh, well, Janis doesn't have to get back, she doesn't have a real job, or she doesn't really work, or she used to make those kind of digs where it's like, oh, well, like, you don't have to worry, like just things like that, where it's like, okay, like I was less than because I didn't punch the clock 9 to 5. And one day I was like, we got to talk about this. Like, because I was like, it doesn't make me feel good. And I mean, me who has to go that next level, I'm like, I also don't take weekends off. Like, I work on the weekend, I work when I bring my work home, and all these things that I felt like I had to justify myself for. And I was like, you know what, at the end of the day, I was like, it didn't make me feel good. Please don't do that anymore. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't know. So it's like, if it's like almost like shame on me if I'm not able to like voice that, like voice how I feel in a
Mhm.
friendship.
Mhm, mhm.
So now it's like, okay, I said something. So if that's a behavior that continues, that's back on her.
Right, right,
Because
right,
we had
right,
this conversation. I told you that that does not sit well with me. And you
right.
keep continuously doing it. That's like unacceptable. Like
Absolutely.
if we're going to be friends, like that's not really like, what's the point if you're going to talk shit?
Yeah.
um, but no, there hasn't been any issues since. So it's like, it's one of those things where if the relationship means enough to you to like have that confrontation, that really awkward conversation, but it's gonna make your relationship better, why
Yeah.
wouldn't you?
Yes. Yes. And that's what I
Yeah.
mean. Like the conversations are different with different situations. Um, I think for me, when I hear that situation, I'm like, yeah, that's when I feel like you should have a conversation and you shouldn't have let it go. But we do. We let things go. There's always in any relationship that you have, there's always like some kind of red flag somewhere. I've had friends that I ended up falling out with that I then in retrospect kept seeing little things where like, why did they say that at that time? And then that sticks in your head and you're like, no, they didn't mean that. And then actually years later, you're like, yeah, they meant that. They meant that. Um, but I guess I say I'm ruthless about it now because I do watch those things more, and maybe that's just experience. Um, and say that behavior is not a friend behavior. Do you want to put up with that? Because frankly, bottom line is at the end of the day, I am just me, and I'm the one that has to live with, someone saying those things and making fun of you in a certain way, even if it's a friend. I think you feel when it's genuine, joking, and when it's not, because I always go with when people tell you who they are, believe them. Believe them. And that is part of, that's been part of my journey, is just speaking up for myself all the time, maybe too much.
But I think you talked about it too, like previously, where like being honest and being real
Yeah.
is really important to you. And you know, I have this conversation, I probably say like the strongest relationship that I have is with my boyfriend, and we're
Mm-hmm.
so like, he totes like honesty. Like he's like, well, it's just like, just be honest with your girlfriends. I was like, I don't think you understand how girlfriends work. Like I'm not sure. But at the root of it, I mean, we laugh because it's like kind of true, but it's also one of those things where it's like, if they're supposedly that close to you and you can't be honest with them, why are they that close to you? Like it's like almost superficial, where it's like, well, I can't just voice to you like, hey, this is honestly how I feel. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty liberating mindset if you follow it.
Yeah.
It's not easy by any means, because I like nobody wants to be the person who like goes against the grain, or
Right.
is unagreeable. But it's like, hey,
Yeah.
you know what, I just want to be real with you, and be honest with you. And if it doesn't gel with you, we can talk about it. But you know don't really have space for like all these superficial things where it's just like you're a yes person, or you're just like, oh,
Right.
okay.
Because that always ends up crumbling to, when
Yeah,
you can't say what you
what you
mean.
feel. Yeah.
And that's when the blowups happen, you
Oh
know,
yes.
when people can't say what they feel, that will blow up in one way or another.
Yeah.
But I really just wanted to talk about that because I think setting boundaries is so important, for people who are doing the things and looking for their own fulfillment
Mhm.
and their own prosperity and success by doing something that they really want to do, you have to be ruthless with boundaries. Also, not just with friends, with yourself, with your time.
Yeah.
You know, boundaries are incredibly important. And I don't think that you can be successful without setting some really tough boundaries for yourself.
I agree. I think it leads to, like you said, a blow up or burnout, or, I mean, no good comes from it.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like, it's funny. I've come to realization working with a coach too about boundaries, because they were like, oh, boundaries, like there's that word again. It's so she and it's like new agey and like, oh, okay, boundaries. But I realized too, if you don't instill those boundaries, like resentment quickly follows.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, like now, like I decided that I'm going to work 7:00 on a Friday night. Like I'm zero boundaries. Like we're good. Like, let's do this. Then it becomes like an ongoing, well, you've set up that behavior pattern where it's like, oh, that's cool. So you shouldn't really have very many boundaries. Like weekends, I can call her Sundays, holidays, Christmas. And then you're like, this person isn't considerate of like my time and things like that. And it's like, well, you've kind of outlined what's acceptable.
Yes.
And you have shown that you don't have boundaries, or your boundaries are very flexible.
Yes.
So they're like, cool. They know no better, you know? So it's kind of putting out there how you want to be treated. And I think it's not easy, but I think it's also pretty liberating if you can get to that place where you're like, hey, you know what, what's going to happen if you say like, hey, actually, I don't take calls on Fridays.
Yeah. Scary for some people.
Let me put that, like, this is going to not freak you out, but it's going to be like, holy crap. She gave me this, my coach gave me this analogy of, she's all, if you wanted to go to the dentist and the dentist was like, hey, I'm only available Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You have to make your appointment in those 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be like, oh, something's not like, would you think less of them because they're not open Thursday or Friday? She's like, why are we so hard on ourselves to be available all the time, where there's multiple business models that have these very strict boundaries?
Yes.
And I thought about that and I was like, whoa, okay.
Yes.
Like it's a kind of okay to, it's not it's 100% all right to say what it is that you want or don't want.
Love. That's literally how I live, and am constantly learning that, even like I said, with myself. I do not we talked about goals. I do not let myself move on until I have completed certain things. It's my way of protecting my mental health, because I know myself. I know I want to do every single thing. And I have to say, no, you can't do that fifth thing until that whole thing on number 3 is completed. And I'm protecting myself too, protecting my mental health, because I know if I have way too many things to do, that's going to lead to burnout. Because for me, burnout and depression usually comes when I have so many things and I have no clue how I'm going to do it. And they're things that I want to do. So I have to cut it off in the beginning, and be like, I haven't finished those other projects yet, not going to move forward. And slowly, because this is a newer thing for me, with like over the last year, with just cutting things off, in the beginning and saying, I'm not going to do that yet. And it's difficult, but it's so necessary for peace of mind, because then you don't have those things hanging over your shoulder like, I'm not done.
That thing hanging on your shoulder sounds like your Libra. They have the same voice.
How dare you? I am a Virgo. nothing against you Libras, but you
Oh,
know.
I think I misspoke. I meant Virgo.
We're going to leave that alone while we're on the
Okay.
air.
She's like, I'm going to need you to walk away.
Oh my goodness, it's this whole Mercury retrograde thing that's
True.
affecting our communication for 6
We'll
weeks.
see. We'll see if this thing will even, like, if the recording's perfect, right? Because doesn't it jam up electronics?
Don't
too?
put that out there, Janis.
Oh, sorry.
This has been a great conversation as per usual. Great conversation on boundaries, which I think will continue because it's such a fertile subject when it comes to really getting your work done, being fulfilled, you know, completing what you want, what you really want to do with your life. You have to have boundaries. You have to have boundaries with yourself, the people you work with, the people you live with, in order for you to be happy. And by setting boundaries, you are setting the tone for how people approach you and how people treat you. That's my bottom line on that.
I love that you say it's an ongoing
yes
thing, because it's a practice. Like, it's something that like you thoughtfully have to practice. It's not, I mean, bless the people it comes natural to, but it's not.
I don't think they exist.
Right.
No, I live with one of those. So. They do exist.
They do exist.
But for those of us for whom that is a practice, yes, you heard that sneeze. For those of us for whom it is a practice, it's ongoing, just like everything else. You know, you learn little by little. And then when you see the results, that's when I think it really starts becoming a practice, when you see that it works for you. And I hope that it works for you. Thank you, Janis, so much for always being so wonderful and informative and bringing so much light to the
I
For
love
the
us.
Doers.
I love our conversations. They're the best.
Thank you. Me too. And that's why we started this. And again, I'm also always grateful to you for helping me get this started. And the conversations have been fantastic. I want to thank everybody for all of their wonderful feedback. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. This is what, the second week of January? Oh my goodness. Second week of January 2022. Lord. But I hope it's a good one for you. Hope you have a very productive and fun and happy week. All right, everybody, take care. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about you. Have a great one. Bye.